Marvel's Endgame has finally been released. The culmination of 21 films and 11 years is finally wrapped up. It should go without saying that this video will have massive spoilers. Make sure to go out and enjoy the movie before watching this one. The grand finale of this much-anticipated film was an absolute blast to watch and made us really think about all the time travel that went on in the film. Many of you saw the time travel twist coming, but we were all wondering how it would work in comparison to other time travel mechanics. Time travel can be tricky, but we're here to break it down for you and bring it all back to some of your favorite time travel classics. Where do we even begin with all this? Well, it would probably start with the core of the movie, the quantum realm. Our heroes begin their story with Scott Lang making his way out of the realm to post-Thanos reality and knocking on the front door of the Avengers base. Once Scott makes his return to our universe, he makes a beeline to his daughter and then heads right to the Avengers base. Once there, he freaks out, going over potential time travel theories. The team is shocked to hear that there could be a possibility the 1 in 14 million shot still could be in the future, and they rush over to see Tony Stark. Stark shoots the proposition down, citing that it's literally impossible and he has made peace with the present. After they leave, Tony does what he does best and works on a theorem just in case and happens to solve the time puzzle. Some sort of quantum Mobius mumbo-jumbo inverted whatever. The team quickly assembles, strategizes, and goes after the stones. But in case you weren't paying attention, this is where things get a little tricky.
You want to get personal.
In every other piece of time travel media we've seen, they always say never to talk to anyone, yada yada, butterflies and the like, but even Professor Hulk shoots that down. Basically what he's saying is they have no way to know for sure, but time has an interesting way of correcting itself. Hence the final battle. In this movie, many of the characters meddle with the past with little to no repercussions. I mean, Captain America fought himself and went to go live in the past before returning back to the present. It would seem everything worked out in the endgame. The tricky part with all this time travel doesn't lie with what will or could happen. It lies in what happens in the infinite other universes currently being protected by the Ancient One or Doctor Strange. When Professor Hulk goes back to past New York, he meets the Ancient One with Tilda Swinton reprising her role. She completely shuts Banner down, forcing him into the astral plane where he can do nothing to get the stone. She tells him with great caution that by taking the stone from her current timeline, unfathomable evils will befall her and her universe. By removing the stone, alternate timelines will begin to split off, creating a fragmented MCU timeline and multiple universes. Banner urges her that it is very important to retrieve the time stone, citing Doctor Strange's actions in the last film. Within seconds, she hands over the stone with full awareness that Steve Strange is and will be the best sorcerer in the universe. Without him, without the time stone, and without the new gauntlet, all that is, was, and will be is doomed. Professor Hulk informs her that they have a plan for the split realities and that everything will be set back into place once Thanos' actions are undone. The plan is to go back to the exact moments that the stones are stolen and put them back before anything can go wrong. When you watch the movie, this plan feels a bit reckless, but the Avengers aren't thinking that far ahead. Doctor Strange and Tony did that for them. All they need to do is right the wrongs. At this point, the only other loose end they need to tie is making sure that Thanos can't recreate the snap if all the stones are placed back. It's unclear if they would need to spend the rest of their lives making sure he doesn't or kill him. Things end up working out in the end as Thanos from the past catches wind of this plan to thwart what he eventually accomplishes and invades the future. They have a battle of all things past and future, dead and alive. Eventually, the team stops them with the help of everyone who perished coming through dimensional portals opened by Doctor Strange. We see Captain America wield Thor's hammer in the fight, and finally, we have the Tony-Thanos showdown. When Tony has them and snaps his fingers, he eliminates Thanos' army, along with our favorite purple space god. With Thanos gone and the stones returned, everything seems right in the universe. Well, maybe not. There are a few odd kinks to work out, but they're not terribly important to the immediate story. But of all the time travel movies out there, Endgame makes it easy. It didn't rely on bad writing, poor plot devices, or loose ends. Things were a bit rushed despite being 3 hours long, and some plot devices were to be assumed, but the wrap-up was much more satisfying than other similar movies. Take Back to the Future, for example. It's even cited in the movie as being a bit fantastical. It's a great nod to the way time and time travel have evolved over 10+ years of the MCU and Hollywood widely. If we look at how Back to the Future handled time travel, the short answer to that would be poorly. Well, kind of. Everyone within the movie meddles with time in a way that doesn't really make sense. The things that Marty meddles with ends up significantly changing the future, although Marty doesn't have an easy way to fix things like the Avengers did. Back to the Future relies on a handful of time travel theories like the predestined timeline theory, the traditional timeline theory, displaced timeline theory, and so on. Each of these theories should operate outside of each other, but Back to the Future ties them all together. This creates a ton of loopholes and paradoxes. Speaking of loopholes, Looper does something similar to the Avengers. Looper poses that all changes in the past will inform the future. This is the main premise of the Ancient One's warnings to a degree. She poses that altering the past splits timelines while still informing the future Professor Hulk came from. Looper handles this cleverly by tying up loose ends right where they start.
This is called closing your loop.
Although what Endgame did was arguably a better conclusion than what Looper could offer. But give Looper some credit, this time travel stuff isn't easy, and the Avengers had a magical space gauntlet on their side to help fix things. Even movies like Star Trek still left massive paradoxes while meddling with time. Similar to Endgame, Star Trek shows time manipulation as something that can span seconds in one timeline and decades in another. This seems to be a common theme, so let's break it down a little bit more. In Endgame, the heroes use the quantum realm, which we know operates at a different time frequency, so to say. The team figures out how to use a time GPS to pinpoint exact physical places within the realm they can use to exit in other times. This theory is a bit far-fetched, but it ends up working out for them with Tony's math and design. Once inside the quantum realm, hours and days are only seconds in the present real world, regardless of where the user is trying to go. But here's the one place that the Avengers messed up. Time is only distorted inside the quantum realm. When they send people into the realm and then pull them back, only seconds have lapsed. But our heroes spent minutes and hours outside the quantum realm to retrieve or put the stones back. This would mean that for Professor Hulk to retrieve Captain America, he would have needed to wait for hours or days. He would only need to give him seconds to account for his time inside the quantum realm, but much more time for what he spent outside of it. Is there a chance that once the threat of danger was gone, Professor Hulk expanded on Tony's work? In a similar way, Star Trek handles this problem inversely. The time that people spend time traveling is mere seconds, but on the outside it can be decades or millennia. In either movie, the consequences for time travel remain the same. Time isn't something to be trifled with, and doing so will always come back to haunt you. This was the whole premise of the movie, but in Star Trek, time travel happens because of time travel in an odd paradoxical twist. In Endgame, time pushes back in a much more subtle way. Nothing happens in Endgame because of time travel itself. However, Thanos obviously finds his way back to the future because of the time GPS. Another movie that was called out in Endgame was Hot Tub Time Machine. We found this a bit interesting because it's not exactly the first thing you think of when talking about time travel.
Excuse me, miss. What color is Michael Jackson?
Black?
The movie also doesn't relate anything to Endgame. In Hot Tub Time Machine, the characters end up drastically altering the future by meddling with the past. This is to their benefit, and things aren't completely out of hand.
Was it morally wrong for me to exploit my knowledge of the future for personal financial gain?
For example, one of them gives advice to his past self to start Google, except this time it's called Loogle. Seems pretty harmless, but it showed us that just like in Looper, altering the past drastically affects the future. In this movie, it's presumed there are no split timelines, just a changed future. In Endgame, this doesn't happen. Many characters meddle with the past, but nothing ever comes from it. However, going forward, we may see more consequences. In Endgame, our heroes were more focused on being with their loved ones rather than catching up. It is entirely possible that we will see the consequences of these actions in future movies. The next big Marvel release will be Spider-Man: Far From Home, which takes place directly after the events of Endgame. We already know from this movie that Peter and his friends help save Europe, but they still have a lot of catching up to do. It would be weird to start Far From Home without at least some recap for our dearly departed Peter Parker. And it makes sense to bring it all back to the next movie and Peter himself. Peter Parker is ultimately the only person Tony never shook off losing. Seeing his framed photo after a visit from the remaining Avengers gives him just enough to look into the possibilities of time. The possibilities of bringing Peter home. In the end game, everything worked out for almost everyone. Barring a few major deaths, the universe has been corrected, and the universe can begin piecing things back together. What do you think of all this time travel nonsense? Do you think that everything worked out, or are there possibly some unintended side effects? What about the other movies? Did you think that Endgame did it better than the others? Drop us a comment below and let us know what you think. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest from Endgame and your other favorite franchises.